This is a podcast from Luleå University of Technology.
Hello and welcome to this discussion on oral examinations. Do you want to know more about oral examinations? This is the podcast for you. My name is Marcus Järne. I am an educational developer at the Center for Educational Development here at LTU. With me in the studio I have Professor Marcus Liwicki.
Hey.
And Professor Fredrik Sandin.
Hey, hey.
Welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here at LTU and your experience from teaching. Starting with Marcus.
Yeah, I'm Marcus Liwicki. I'm the Vice Rector for Applied AI at the university and also the head of the machine learning group. And I've been doing research in machine learning. These are methods, machines which are inspired by the brain to learn to perform tasks like humans might do them. And I've also experience in teaching already for around 20 years.
Fredrik?
Yes, hi, I'm Fredrik Sandin, professor of machine learning, and I have been teaching since I was a final year student myself, focusing heavily on traditional teaching methods and using written exams, and have lately been learning and become really fond of oral examination.
Could you, Fredrik, in short terms, explain the oral examination that you have designed for your courses or for this course?
Yeah, the starting point is basically the intended learning outcomes for the course. So for each learning outcome that we expect, we have broken this down into a set of questions. And these questions we share with the students, and they work on self-assessment tasks during the course. And part of those self-assessment tasks are to study these questions and sequentially develop their understanding of the answer to them. So this is how the students prepare during the course. And then in preparation for the oral exam, we make some practice rounds in live sessions for the students to become more familiar with the oral exam setup and what to expect, because many students are new to this.
Mm-hmm. And to maybe add on, the intended learning outcomes Fredrik mentioned, they are already based on Bloom's taxonomy of different levels of learning. But also in the questions, we have some more simpler questions. For each learning outcome, maybe 3 to 5 questions, some which really more recall, and some others which are then to compare, to evaluate, or to even apply to maybe unknown problems, some known topic.
Great. So you are comfortable that you cover the ILOs with this or examination that you have?
With
Yes.
the one? Yeah.
So we cover the intended learning outcomes that we intend to cover with the oral exam. And then we have 1 or 2 intended learning outcomes which are evaluated in a project task that the students do.
Okay.
Which are more of the higher level type in Bloom's taxonomy. So they need to show that they can use the knowledge that they have acquired and also extend a bit beyond what we are teaching in the course.
I see. The oral examination is typically used for covering intended learning outcomes that are otherwise hard to measure or to assess in a valid way. Would you agree on that? And could you somewhat elaborate on what is the nature of these ILOs?
Mm-hmm. So, indeed, this refers also to the question why oral examination and not written examination.
Yes.
So in written examination, we typically can understand if persons can repeat knowledge, if they really learn things, if they can solve some problems. But in the oral examination, we can go a bit beyond that. We can interact, we can ask more deeper questions if we realize a basic level is there. And we can also adjust the question if there is a misunderstanding. So sometimes some students They just have a blackout and they would fail the written exam, but in an oral exam they still have a chance to continue. And then in the oral exam we can also pose them. Some of our questions are giving a specific real-world problem, either by explaining it or by showing some graphics of a problem space, and then asking the student, how would you now start solving this? What methods would you apply? And by that we can go individually for each student into different depth levels depending on what they covered already.
That is super interesting. Fredrik, do you want to add anything to that description?
Yeah, maybe just that I think it becomes quite obvious when students have learned something but don't understand it. So with written exams, you can sometimes prepare yourself. So often you can study old exams and you know more or less how to develop a solution to typical problems. But in an oral exam, even though they can study these high-level questions that we share with them, and in some sense they can know the answers to these questions, as soon as we start asking follow-up questions and to really see what they have understood, then it becomes obvious if they understand or only remember something. So I think that's a great benefit of the oral exam. Plus the blackout that you mentioned, Marcus, that sometimes we see this, that students are a bit nervous, and I can imagine that in a written exam they could have problems with the task due to this. But in an oral exam we can call them down, we can ask the question in a different way and so on. So that's a huge benefit.
And there comes quite often then the comment, yeah, but if a student gets super nervous in the oral exam, they will not be able to do anything, while in a written exam they can take their own time and begin writing whenever they want. And we have indeed some students who have problems with oral examination. It's far less than 10%. It's just 1 or 2 out of 80 students in a typical course. But these students, we can then, they know it typically already in advance, and we can then address this issue by giving them some specific questions we will ask beforehand. We give them 5 minutes, 10 minutes time to begin formulating. Then they have stepped over the first burden, and then the natural discussion starts directly.
Yeah. I just want to sum up what I think that you have said, and you could agree or disagree to these statements. One of the benefits that you said that you have, it's that the oral examination that you're using can adapt to the student. And in that way, you can cover more of the ILOs, you can go in depth, and you can take other tracks. And this adaptation is also to the understanding of the questions posed. Was that correct? Correctly understood from my perspective?
Yes. Yep. Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how you prepare the students for oral examinations and the course that this oral exam is used in?
So the course itself is about neural networks and learning machines. So students learn the algorithms behind making computers, training computers to solve tasks in an intelligent way. And in this course, they learn more concepts and algorithms every week. And we ask them already from the first week to make a reflective report where they write, how do I move on towards the ILOs of the course. So we have the ILOs of the course, and they see, at the end I should know what neural networks are, how they work. And in this week I learned this and this ingredient. So they reflect already on converging towards the ILOs. And they have a peer review process. So each student looks into 2 other reports and gives them feedback, and we give them some instructions how to do it in a way that it's constructive. And by that, it's really highly welcomed by the students. They stay in the course. We have a very low dropout rate, and they really enjoy and get very much prepared already to think towards the ILOs. And since our exam questions are also aligned with the ILOs, they can really match their learning outcomes with the ILOs and with the possible questions we will ask in the exam. And then we have, as Fredrik mentioned already earlier, the preparation session where we have a rehearsal exam in our live lecture or in a lab where a volunteer comes and I ask them some questions and then they answer, and they typically do not know everything perfectly, but they get an idea because we give the students already the set of 20, 30 questions which we use. They are there. The students can have them. And they can prepare even answers for these questions beforehand by themselves, so they can have a document. They cannot take this document into the exam, but they can prepare mentally for the questions we will ask. We call them seed questions. And then we go sometimes a bit deeper, as I mentioned, depending on the level of the student. We can go into more higher levels of the Bloom's taxonomy. And then we use these example questions. We start exactly with such example questions in the rehearsal session of the course. The student answers something, gets maybe help from some peers if they don't know, and we jointly come up with what would be good answers, what would not be good, how can the learning be improved. And then these typical tips we are giving to the students are: do practice exams. So besides learning the content and discussing with the peers if you learn the same, if you understood everything and so on, also do a session, a rehearsal exam with your friends, with your peers, where they ask you some questions, you ask them some questions back, and you try to evaluate each other. And most of the students are engaged and do that, and we have a very low failure rate in our exams.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you want to add anything to that, Fredrik? Yeah.
Maybe I could add that, as you described, Marcus, they are working with these self-assessment tasks, and there is a weekly report, and there is like a progression in what they are expected to report every week. And this is something we hear in the feedback from the students, both in the course evaluation and in the oral exams, that they highly appreciate the self-assessment process because it makes them aware about their own learning, how much efforts they are investing, and they also identify where they need to put a bit more effort into their studies to keep aligned with the course progression. So I think that's really good that the students appreciate this process and they really say this to us in the feedback.
Yeah, I see. So you're both guiding the students through the course towards the examination, so to speak, and also what is sometimes mentioned as a drawback for using examinations at all is that it will narrowing the curriculum, and you're have sayings such as teaching to the test will destroy the education, etc. What I can see here is an example where teaching to the test is not a problem because the test itself has such a high validity, or the use of the result can be really valid for their purposes.
There is an additional aspect. You mentioned it. The exam slot is not only about us and asking questions to the students, but it becomes quite interactive in the second part of this exam slot. Typically, we assign 20 or 30 minutes of the slot, and just the first half is where we ask them questions. But then it becomes also in the direction, what problems did you have in your practical assignment or in the project? Can you tell us a bit more? And then they speak about it, and they say how they solved something, but also where they're still stuck. And then we give them sometimes even during the exam some feedback, what they could maybe think of to improve in the future. And finally, we also use this to give them feedback to the actual examination process, where they get already directly after the exam a feedback, not only, yes, you passed and you get a very good mark, or you just passed with a 3. We give them also feedback of where they were good, where not, and how they could improve their learning process in future lectures. So for me, it's very important, even when I have 200 students, I don't want to give a written exams. I really would like to spend then 20 minutes per student of the time. We can give a little bit of mentoring towards the student as well. And this is very welcome. So a very good advantage of this oral exam is we almost never have a student who fights the results afterwards, because it was already clear out of the process before, out of the discussion we had afterwards. Just it happens once every 2 or 3 years that a student is really not happy having not passed, and then they, of course, try to fight that evaluation. But also there we take a log of the exam. We do not record it for GDPR reasons, but we are taking notes, what we asked, what the student answers, and then we get through this again, and then the student realizes, oh yes, if I look at the intended learning outcomes and we have also not only the exam questions, but also what we expect for a 3, a 4, and a 5. And if they look at this, they realize, no, I really did not measure or fulfill all the requirements for the 3, but I can try it again. And then they also know in an after discussion, we have very rarely such a discussion, but when we have it, they even come out of those saying, yes, I have the insight now, I need to redo it.
It's the design. It seems like you have a good idea of constructive alignment, where you are using dialogues as a driving force towards knowledge, and have a design for your examination that can provide this. What I think that the listener wants to hear about is, how do you manage this?
Starting with a comparison to written exams. So in my experience, and also the rule of thumb that we use between colleagues, is that you have to allocate about half an hour per written exam before you have finished the grading and reporting and so on. And with the oral exams, as you said, Marcus, we allocate typically 20 minutes and sometimes 30 minutes per student. And with the written exams, very few students look at the feedback we give on the written exams. So you basically invest half an hour per student, but it doesn't lead to much interaction and learning on the student side, and neither on our side. We don't get any feedback from the students this way. While in the oral exam, we spend these 20, 30 minutes with the student, and it's a highly interactive session, and I think we are learning many things on both parts.
And we have now, for example, a running course with 100 students, and we have to say that we share the teaching responsibilities also. Typically it's not just 1, but 2 or 3 teachers involved. And then we allocate just 2 days from maybe 8 to 4, or some prepare. Some even prefer to have a bit longer, maybe till 6 in the evening. And then we have every 20 minutes an exam. And there are just one lecturer and one, we call it a kind of independent student taking notes, but also making sure that the exam is fair. And these 2 resources are then there and listening, doing the exam. And then within 2 days, we have finished all the work of the examination. And that's something which we couldn't do in a written exam. We have to think about the questions, and the actual question, we have to rethink them every year, make sure they don't leak. Once they leak, we have a problem. We address all of these problems. And on the other hand, give a benefit that the student gets individual feedback. And for me, this invest of 20 minutes per student is worth it, because I really want to, as I mentioned in the second half, guide the students towards how to improve in the future. And that's something we have no communication in the written exams. And finally, of course, one can automate everything with automatic questions and quizzes and so on. But we do that as well. We have quizzes where they have every week maybe some questions, or we have automatically checked things as well. But these you design once and then never need to reshape. I really want to invest these 20 to 30 minutes per student per year to give them also some chance to grow in the future.
Yeah, well, 20 minutes per student seems reasonable for an examination. So
Yes.
yeah, but do you agree on your assessments in this course? If you have two teachers, actually, I want to know about the reliability.
Yes, so maybe we should add, you mentioned it, Marcus, before, that we are making notes, and we make these notes collaboratively. So we have two teachers making one oral exam, and they take notes in the same document, so we can even communicate between us, the teachers. And then, as was mentioned, we have grading criteria. So we are trying to define clearly what is expected for grade 3, for grade 4 and 5. So this is what we try to assess then in the exam. And I think a strength here, all examination is typically subject to a sampling constraint. You cannot ask all the questions concerning all the possible aspects that the students should learn. So you select a subset of the questions. And depending on which subset you might select, this could fit better or worse a particular student. So I think this is in particular a problem with written exams. With the oral exams, we have the possibility to, for example, if we have a student that is struggling a bit to reach level 3 or pass, we can ask them open questions like, what didn't we ask you that you can tell us something about? Or could you please speak for 3 minutes about this topic, which is important in the course? And then they can tell us what they know, and we can ask follow-up questions on that. So that's one aspect which I think is important.
Max, do you want to add to that? Fredrik was talking about both that you can cover more of the content, or you can make a better sample, but that you were also mentioning that you are using criteria that are explicit for this examination, and that helps in the reliability issue.
And we have to say we converge to that in order to align us, because the history of this is that already back before I joined Lulio, and I had used oral exams, and I had structured them already regarding different ILOs and so on, but we came then to the conclusion, let's do some exams together. As you mentioned, two teachers doing the exam. So for the first year, there were only 30 students. We were doing all these exams together. So it was like a 1 hour invest almost per student. But this was also an alignment process of us. And then we realized, okay, we adjusted them towards the ILO. So we came up with all this over the time. And now that we have this, we are quite well aligned. And still when we do the course development discussion, so we get the feedback from the students and we do our normal course development report, we also look at the exam questions, and we look at the distribution of marks Fredrik gave to his students and I gave. And sometimes we see they are slightly different. It's not a huge difference, but there is a slight difference. This time I had 5 more students who passed with a perfect mark, excellent grade. So it was 15 for me, 10 for Fredrik. And then we were discussing how and why. And we were then adjusting the description of the criteria for the perfect mark to make it even more clear what we expect. And then we are again aligned for the next iteration of the course.
Yeah, and you can make the criteria more clear without compromising that you asked what you wanted to know about. Yeah. Okay.
Can I add an aspect to this? What you were telling, Marcus? I think it was, for me, I didn't have any previous experience of oral exams. So when we did this the first time, this was a really useful session for me to learn. How you can ask these questions and how you can deal with the answers that you get from the students and so on. And now we are doing the same, as you said, with the younger PhD students that are lab assistants, and so we are educating the next generation of teachers that can pick this up and that feel confident using oral examination. So I think that's something that is valuable to do.
Yeah, we do also with our senior staff who become responsible for lectures in the future, peer exams. And then first we do mainly the exam, they listen in, take notes, but then they partially take over areas where they feel very confident in asking already, and later they feel even confident to do the whole exam. And afterwards, after 2-3 exams, we give them some feedback. We have a small half-hour time slot where I give to one of our other seniors feedback about how the questions were asked, how maybe the reaction of the student could have been interpreted in a way that you can ask the follow-up question to make understand what you actually mean. And then they learn by doing and get better in that as well.
And that's interesting. So you have thought about also training other teachers to examine the students.
It requires a lot of practice. It's not something you can just read or listen in this podcast once. You have to really try it out a few times, maybe with a more experienced person.
Yes.
And get some feedback on how you do it.
Yeah, I bet it is. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for other teachers who want to introduce oral examinations in their classes or courses?
So the first recommendation to give is, don't hesitate. Don't think it will take me too much time. You can do it. And we have even tried out with seniors who were very inexperienced in giving exams. Once you have a set of questions, these you will align to the ILOs. If you are unsure with this process, ask someone more experienced, maybe the chair in the group, could be seed questions. But once you have these seed questions, you always have something as an examiner to fall back to. You can exactly ask this question as it's formulated as a seed question, and then it will reduce your nervousness. And once you have done it 2-3 times, you get more and more fluent. And you can even try it. We did that as well with some PhD students in our group. So you don't use yet the students whose life might depend or whose mark depends on what you gave them, but you can use some PhD students, ask this exam, and ask at the end the PhD student, what do you think? Do you have some suggestions? And this feedback, or being open for feedback, is very useful to improve.
Yeah, I fully agree. And maybe also to say that I think it's a really rewarding thing to try, because for me, who have spent a lot of time in the past correcting written exams, which is quite tedious work, this is really rewarding. And once you get the hang on it, it's not, it doesn't consume a lot of time to do it, and it's just fun.
Thank you. I think that could conclude this discussion.
Yes. That's perfect.
Many thanks. Yeah, many thanks to you, Professor Liwicki, and Professor Sandin, for participating. Sound technicians today was Maria Jakobsson, and that concludes this episode. Thank you for listening.
This has been a podcast from Luleå University of Technology.